Memes ask, what are the key requirements in place for past scientific revolutions? I think my impression is that sort of what launches a scientific revolution is some kind of new methodology, either new experimental methodology or new theoretical methodology. And on the experimental side, what often happens is that there is sort of an ambient growth of technology having nothing to do with science, just, better lens grinding for people to make glasses, or better or electronics, amplification of electronics or something like this, or computers for that matter, being built for some completely different purpose. And then at some moment, it gets realized, gosh, we can use this technology for a method of doing science, typically maybe some experimental method or some modern computer experimental method or something like this. And then there's sort of this sudden moment when lots of things get opened up, and there's kind of a lot of change in the science. I mean, I suppose an interesting question for today is, if we look at the whole neural nets AI story, is that going to be something where, I think I talked about this in fact last time, is that going to be something where kind of that suddenly opens up sort of a new opportunities in science that didn't exist before, because methodology has been developed for reasons having nothing to do with science itself? I think that's an interesting question. I consider that that's still up in the air. I've been working on a little bit of, to what extent can you expect to use this new methodology to do things that have been of scientific interest before, or, and this is often the case, when sort of you open up new kinds of experiments or something, or new methodologies, that the questions you end up asking end up changing as well. Because it could be the case that there are these mysteries in science and nobody can solve them. Suddenly some new method comes along and it solves those mysteries. Or it could be that some new method comes along and you realize there are a bunch of new questions that you never thought to ask before that you can now ask. I mean, we see that, for example, with the LLMs, questions about sort of the structure of language, the structure of knowledge, and so on, that we didn't really have wasn't something that it seemed to make sense to ask before this, but now it does. I think one of the things that always helps a scientific revolution is when the place where it's going into is fairly desolate. That is, if there's a field that is where lots of stuff is happening and everybody's very excited that it's all being solved, and then some new method arrives, typically people are like, oh, we're making progress anyway. We don't need this new thing. And so there's less enthusiasm for it than there would otherwise be. And, so I think that it helps when sort of everything else is burnt out. And then suddenly there's this new spark of life, so to speak, that can then take off and can expand sort of into a vacuum, rather than having to push back existing kinds of ideas in that area. So that would be my impression about what's involved there.